Hi, I'm Ryann Soltero, and today I'm going to be talking with you all about climate change's effects on health. So some background information first. We have things in our atmosphere called greenhouse gases, and one of these is CO2. Basically what happens with climate change is there comes so much CO2 in our atmosphere that it traps heat on Earth. And so that means that temperatures, both hot and cold, become more extreme. In places that are already experiencing extreme weather, any type of weather, it could be flooding or earthquakes, things like that, will worsen, and so there'll be more heat waves, and they'll be even worse, and there'll be longer winters, and they'll be a lot colder too. This also can cause warming waters, which causes toxic algal blooms and waterborne diseases, which are both very bad for your health. The most affected health-wise by climate change are children, elderly, and economically disadvantaged groups. This means people that are poor and in poverty. And this, a lot of it has to do with the global north versus the global south. Physically, our bodies can become unable to properly regulate its temperature due to climate change. This can cause heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, hyperthermia, hypothermia, frostbite, worsening of chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, cerebrovascular disease, and diabetes-related conditions. So with air pollution, this means that there's increased levels of O3 and CO2. And this causes in people for pollutant and aeroallergen issues to increase. Regarding food, when there's climate change, there's a chance for the disruption of food availability and a decrease in access to food. This is due partly to contamination of food when things get too hot and they can spoil, and it can also be due to changes of weather patterns and the climate and the food growth and how that affects crops and things of that nature. CO2 also, the increase lowers the levels of protein in many largely used crops, making them less nutrient-filled. An example of this, it's not a food crop necessarily, but when flowers have pollen, they have less protein in them. And so bees, for example, are getting less protein from these, honeybees are getting less protein from these flowers, and it's harder for them to produce honey and things like that. In Connecticut, it has warmed 2 to 3 degrees in the last century. And this means that the levels of ozone pollution have increased, and so have asthma-related issues. This has also caused disruption of infrastructure such as roads, bridges, utilities, and power outages. And there's also have been heavy rains and hurricanes recently. And this is my Works Cited. Thank you for listening.